in 2021, Tucker Carlson claimed on his Fox News program that he was being spied on by the NSA. Now, people didn't take him seriously, but ultimately an NSA whistleblower did come forward verifying Tucker Carlson's claim. And what transpired was the NSA spied on communication between Tucker and a, quote, U.S.-based Kremlin intermediary who was helping him secure an interview with Putin. Now, a bombshell report has been released by Anya Parampil from the Grayzone. She has unveiled that she was the person who was helping him set up the interview. Anya revealed she's friends with Tucker Carlson. Tucker knew that she might have sources in Russia as someone who had worked for RT America and asked for a contact. She then introduced Tucker to a Russian contact and was subsequently labeled as a U.S.-based Kremlin intermediary. Now, Tucker explained some of what happened when he went on the Full Send podcast this past March 10th and said this.
I've been all over the world. I feel like I've been everywhere except Russia. And Russia is a combatant in a war that's changing the world. And like, I should go see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was planning on it, and I got stopped by the U.S. government from doing it. And I was.
Well, you were going to go?
Of course.
And what were you going to do?
Interview Putin. Why wouldn't
you
I?
You had it set up?
I was working on it, and they broke into my text messages. The NSA broke into my Signal account, which I didn't know they could do.
Oh, so Signal's not even safe.
Oh, God.
Signal is
you're not safe anywhere, huh?
Safe.
Oh,
Signal is not safe.
Well, that U.S.-based Kremlin intermediary is with us now, the so-called Kremlin intermediary, Anya Parampil. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me, Kim.
So first of all, who gets away with calling you this without any evidence whatsoever that you are a Kremlin a U.S.-based Kremlin intermediary? How can they even get away with this? Are you thinking about going after them in some way for smearing you like this?
I don't know who they are because they're anonymous U.S. officials who spoke with Axios reporter Jonathan Swan. And I mean, I laughed when this story first came out, but I also wasn't surprised just because I know that a lot of people would point to the fact that I worked for RT America between the years 2014 and 2018 and say that that somehow makes it legitimate that the US government claimed this about me. But I don't think they would ever apply that standard to someone who worked for Al Jazeera or someone who worked for the BBC. Journalists are, even if they work for a state-funded organization, are journalists. And either way, I stopped working for RT in 2018. I have never accepted payment from a state or a state-funded organization. The Grayzone never has. Even when we travel or participate in conferences in foreign countries, we never accept comped hotels and travel expenses or anything like that from a state. And so even if that is what they were basing, even if my relationship with RT is what they would have based that claim on, that relationship ended years before this story took place, years before 2021, which is the focus of this story regarding when the NSA spied on Tucker.
Yeah, it's just such a smearing label. I mean, I guess when you think about it, I guess it's, I get you are U.S. based. I guess technically you were acting as an intermediary between a Russian diplomat of some sort, a Russian official of some sort, and Tucker Carlson. But it's just, why don't they just say a U.S. journalist was helping with this facilitation,
or name me?
Right, or
say
name
who I am and let me explain my side of the story, which is now what I finally did. But if U.S. officials are just characterizing me as something without naming me, then that suggests they thought they could get away with it because they're, as you're saying, yeah, maybe I was technically introducing Tucker to a Russian diplomat, but the way they describe me as an intermediary, it makes it sound as though I work for the Kremlin or that I was representing the interests of a foreign government.
Right. That's exactly what it sounds like. When they say Kremlin, when they add that in there, it's as if you were working on behalf of the Kremlin, rather than you just being a US-based intermediary, if they wanted to say it that way without putting that Kremlin word in there. So, it's really tricky how they're always smearing, and trying to use language in order to get people to have a certain viewpoint in their mind. And what they wanted this to sound like clearly was they were trying to go after Tucker to make him look like he was somehow an asset of the Russian government. Why do you think he was targeted rather than, plenty of other people have interviewed Putin. So why was Tucker surveilled and targeted, do you think? Or do you think they're doing it to everybody, to all of these other journalists who are also sitting down with Putin? It's just that they got caught with Tucker.
No, I think Tucker posed a very specific threat, which was that unlike every other time that Putin has sat down with a U.S. journalist, Tucker may have actually asked him some intelligent questions and allowed him to speak for himself, which is what journalists are supposed to do. But typically, Putin sits down for interviews with U.S. journalists who attack him, and just as they do with plenty of foreign officials that are considered enemies of the United States, they never actually treat them with the respect that they deserve as powerful individuals who are representing the interests of their nation. You should actually just hear them out. And really, I don't think the U.S. public has ever had that opportunity with Putin. And so I think a Tucker Putin interview would have been awesome. I think it would have been interesting for so many people around the world to watch. And the U.S. government knew that. And of course, the timing is significant. This was all happening between April and July 2021, which is after Biden took office, and which was really just a few months before this latest escalation in the Ukraine war, when Russia actually put its soldiers and military invaded Ukraine. And so it was a very tense situation leading up to that moment, whether or not Russia was actually going to make the decision to move ahead, or if there was any sort of chance that they could engage with the United States diplomatically. That was the decision they were calculating at that moment. And I think a Tucker interview could have made a difference, and it definitely wouldn't have had the impact that Victoria Nuland and Jake Sullivan and Anthony Blinken would have wanted.
So this story came out in June of 2021 when Tucker went on to his show and said, I'm being spied on, essentially, and he's been talking about it. Why are you coming out about it now? Did you know then that you were this person that they were referring to? And if so, then why has it taken so long for you to finally come out and say it was me?
I did know all of this was going on as it was happening because, well, the emails, as I explain in the article, that after I connected Tucker with the deputy foreign minister of Russia, they both replied to my email. But then for some reason, whenever Ryabkov, the Russian deputy foreign minister, would send an email to Tucker, he told me it wouldn't deliver, even though Tucker's email address was accurately typed. So it wasn't going to spam. It was just, there was some interference with the communication. And so I didn't think much of it at the time, but then a few weeks after all this was going on was when the NSA whistleblower met with Tucker, and he told me what the whistleblower told him, which was that they had accessed his communication, somehow knew he was in contact with Russian officials and trying to plan this interview. And I mean, so I knew all of that was going on. And then when Tucker told the story and then Axios came and said that there was a Kremlin intermediary at that time, yeah, I knew that it was me that they were referring to. And I didn't go public with it then because, first of all, Tucker had never addressed the actual details of the story he was working on publicly. He just said that the Biden administration had spied on him while he was preparing a story. He didn't reference the Putin interview. And so I didn't want to come out with that information. And I had just had a kid. I was so wrapped up in other things. I wasn't really prepared for the drama. But then a few weeks ago, Tucker did publicly share some of the information. He went on this podcast, the Full Send podcast, and explained that surveillance had to do with when he was planning an interview with Putin. And since I saw that comment was out there, I was like, okay, this would be a good time to tell the full story. And so I did it.
Are you worried that you're under surveillance? If they are labeling you a US-backed Kremlin intermediary, that would suggest that they accuse you or suspect you of potentially of working for the Kremlin, somehow being connected to the Kremlin. Are you worried that you're under surveillance?
I honestly, I've had no indication that I'm under surveillance, and I know that there is no proof that I am a representative of a foreign government. So does
It
that
doesn't
mean
seem
the
to
U.S.
matter,
government?
though. I mean, look what they're
Exactly.
spying on Tucker. They're spying on journalists who are just looking for interviews. And you're a journalist who's often looking for interviews.
Yeah.
And the Grayzone, you guys do a lot of really explosive stuff. So my guess is, I mean, how would you know
I mean,
if you're being surveilled?
I don't know. I was just asking Glenn Greenwald that question today. I haven't heard back yet, but I would like to know if there's a way for either Tucker or I to find out whether or not there is a FISA warrant covering one of our communications.
Yeah,
As a
couldn't
U.S.
you ask
citizen,
I mean, you would be able to put in the freedom of information. Well, you should be
I
able to
think that would be
ask,
the
right?
way. Yeah, I think that would be the way. I'm not a national security reporter, so I've never really learned how to do that. But I'm sure someone could figure it out or teach me how.
Well, if you
I
ask, they're gonna put you on the list the minute you ask. Hey, am I under
right.
surveillance? Should
I
you
always,
be?
as a U.S. citizen and a journalist, I always assume my right to privacy because I'm constitutionally guaranteed it, and not only just a U.S. citizen, but then doubly as a journalist, the free press can't function unless journalist communications are kept private. So I also don't put anything past this government just because of what I already know. And so we don't know whether or not they were spying on this Russian diplomat, then noticed that Tucker was communicating with him and decided that they wanted to leak the information for political reasons. That's kind of my hunch. But if they are spying on me or Tucker, I would like to find that information out.
Yeah, I think I wish I knew if there was a way to do it without them then flagging you and saying, well, you're under surveillance now. And I do know from speaking to FBI agents in the past that they say oftentimes when you do ask, they'll then start one after that point. If you're not if you're not being surveilled already, or if you're not on a terrorist watch list, for example, then you might be on one after asking. But really, I mean, look, you mentioned I'm a journalist. I shouldn't be on there. I have a constitutional right to this privacy, but it is curious why Tucker's text messages were surveilled in this way. If they are surveilling the Russians who are, this one is in the United States. Is this a U.S. based diplomat?
No.
Oh, this is somebody in the.
He's in
Okay.
Moscow. But I mean, it's very related to the trend that we saw throughout the Trump administration. And this was something that I really only realized yesterday while I was preparing for an interview. You may remember that there was Michael Flynn, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, a lot of the main characters surrounding Trump throughout Mueller's Russiagate investigation were all indirectly spied on because the U.S. government was trying to build this Russia meddling case. And so they were picking up all these communications with Russian media officials and then leaking stories and building cases against U.S. citizens based on those communications. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they were just casting a very wide net to link anybody who's around Trump to the Russian government. And with this case, the way that they did it, the fact that they didn't name me and they just used a weird way of like innuendo and suggesting I was a Kremlin agent and really in order to really undermine Tucker suggests to me that that was actually their goal here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it seems like they're still trying to build the case. They're still trying to connect. And, as the tensions rise with the war, the looming, potential World War III that we're going to be maybe marching ourselves into, that the one thing when it comes to the Espionage Act is that they have charged just as many journalists under the Espionage Act as they have people who've worked for the government who maybe then gave information or somehow was accused of being a spy. Journalists are often targeted. And that is what people, I don't think, fully understand about this country, unfortunately, is that half of the people who've been charged with espionage in this country were journalists of some sort, working for newspapers, television, radio, treason, also same thing. People that were in radio, newspapers, often charged, the very few cases this country has charged anybody with treason. It has been half of them journalists. This is what people don't, this country has not been very, as friendly to journalists and the free press as the country claims, as Julian Assange sits in jail. So I wouldn't put anything past them. And I do think that if they were surveilling this Russian diplomat or this Russian official, anybody who then communicated with that Russian official is probably also under they had those, this is what Snowden brought about, right? Was that the tentacles reach further because they say, well, we're now able to surveil you because we caught you talking to this person we were surveilling. And so now we're surveilling you. You're part of that surveillance. So that is a very scary thing. This is a very scary thing. And to find out that it was you who was this person, another journalist. You're not, and that's the thing that's so scary about it. Tucker's a journalist, you're a journalist, and they were surveilling both of your interactions, calling you a Russian-backed Kremlin intermediary. This is outrageous. Every American should be angry.
What we were doing was not atypical for journalists. Journalists all the time share their contacts, and that's how all journalism happens. That's how all interviews happen, is because producers and contacts and media help each other gain access or get contacts with offices. And otherwise, without that kind of level of interaction, there would be no real journalism. There would just be people who already have financial or state relationships with government officials.
Well, and every journalist should try to pursue the interviews with the world leaders, no matter which country they're in charge of. Every journalist wants to sit down with every single leader in the world and ask them questions. Especially if we're marching toward war with that country. Yeah. I think especially if we're possibly going to have a nuclear war with Russia, we should be hearing more from their president, getting their perspective. I mean, instead, the same people who want to march us into that war are the ones trying to prevent this communication between a journalist and a head of state. Yeah, we shouldn't be relying on Dennis Rodman, for example, to give us information on what Kim Jong-un is thinking. Things like this. We should be sitting down with these leaders and finding out what from them, from the horse's mouth, what is going on, their perspective on things, whether people believe it or not. It is their right after seeing the interview. But Anya, thank you for being on the show and for for outing yourself, I suppose, as this person. I do think it's important in the world of journalism for people to understand that these are two journalists that were seeking an interview and ended up being spied on by the U.S. government. So important.
Thank
Kim.
You. Yeah. I always appreciate coming on your show and hearing what you have to say in general. So
thank you so much, Anya. And that article, if anybody wants to read it, which I'm sure you all should read it, actually, it is very intriguing and eye-opening. It is on the Grayzone's website. The link is down below. I am the U.S.-based Kremlin intermediary that tried to help Tucker Carlson book an interview with Putin. And again, that link is down below. So thank you, Anya. Let me tell you guys about a new great product I've been using. It is called Field of Greens, and it is a way to get all of your fruits and vegetables into your diet, which is very difficult to do, trust me. But it's easy when you've got Field of Greens because you just sprinkle the powder into your drink. You could sprinkle it onto your food. You can make a salad dressing out of it. There's a lot of different ways, and you can get really creative in using the Field of Greens. I've never tried baking it into anything, but I'm just now thinking, what if I tried baking it into, muffins in the morning or something like that, right? Then I could get all my fruits and vegetables. I don't know. I'll have to ask them if that works. I think it would. I don't see why not. But it is a freeze-dried powder of your fruits and vegetables, no extracts. You can use it how you want, and you're going to get your daily dose of fruits and vegetables so that you can get all of the nutrients your body needs to stay in tip-top shape mentally, physically, all of those great ways. You just go to fieldofgreens.com and use the promo code Kim. You will get 15% off your first order. I personally really like the lemon lime. I drink that. It tastes like iced tea with lemon, green tea with lemon. That's what it tastes like. So I prefer it that way, but use your imagination and then email me and let me know how you're using it. I'm curious to hear from you. So again, it's fieldofgreens.com. Use that promo code Kim to get 15% off your first order.